Welcome to Empowered Through Compassion podcast. If you are interested in the intersection of trauma healing, compassion, and personal transformation, this is the right place for you. Join me, David, and my wife, Heather, along with other clinicians, trainers, authors, and leaders in this evolving world of trauma healing. Through compassionate conversation, we look at powerful therapeutic approaches such as internal family systems, IFS, EMDR, and motivational interviewing to see how they can lead us to deep and lasting healing. Please join our Lunch, Learn, and Live stream, a free opportunity to connect with the ETC community. These are held on the second Tuesday of every month at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. For the next 4 months, we will speak with a panel of authors from the newly released book, IFS Informed EMDR, Creative and Collaborative Approaches. Check out the ETC website, empoweredthroughcompassion.com, and click on live stream to see our guests and to register for each event. Please remember that this podcast is not a substitute for therapy. If you are seeking support for your own healing, I encourage you to reach out to a trained professional. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Empowered Through Compassion. I am so happy that you are here. And I have a very special guest here today, Bryan Post. He is just a really amazing person who I'm so excited to introduce you to. And Bryan, welcome. Welcome. It's
Thank you,
really nice
David.
to have you.
Excited to be here and spend time with you and your listeners.
Could you maybe do the honors and introduce yourself and something that you feel would be important for the listeners to know about you?
Sure. Well, my name is Bryan Post, and I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma called Mountain View. I was born to a mother out of wedlock, and I was placed shortly after that into foster care, and then I was adopted by the parents that raised me. I had a lot of challenges growing up as a child, and I also had a sibling. She was not my biological sibling, she was my adopted sister. And really, it was the direct experience for myself and observation of her with my parents who loved us very much and were by any measure great parents, but with us, as adopted children, children who had unexpressed grief, they really struggled. And then to realize that those two parents, as beautiful and as amazing as they are and were, my father passed away 18 years ago. They both had significant unresolved traumas in their own childhoods. They were both children of alcoholics. And so you mix that all together and you get World War III. And so that was really the catalyst to really what has been pretty much my life work around the areas of children, families, trauma, adults with trauma, professionals who struggle with trauma. And it's been, I've been really fortunate to have had a lot of great mentors and to also have a brain that is wired for research and also curiosity and questioning the status quo, which has helped me to develop my own approach to working with traumatized individuals.
It sounds like you've been through so much, and you really, I feel, were able to take the pain of what you experienced and transform it into something that is really not only healing, metamorphosizing for yourself, but also to others as a motivational speaker, as a researcher, as an author. Like it's really something that you're able to gift, out to the world now, which is beautiful to see.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been asked over the years, and I've been doing this work now for almost 27 years consistently, and I've been asked all the time how I got started. Well, and I really do believe that God made me to do this work from my conception all the way through every experience I've ever had. I've gotten to see pretty much, the worst of the human condition and the human existence, and also seen what happens when people are able to heal their traumas, able to create meaningful relationships, and use that as a catalyst towards living a successful life, or at least contributing to society in a positive way.
Yeah.
Carl Rogers, who was the father of motivational interviewing, he was way back in the 70s. So I was fortunate to cut my teeth during the decade of the brain. And all the explosive research that came out during that time, whether it's motivational interviewing, whether it's internal family systems, EMDR, they're actually all interwoven within the foundation of my work. And my work was rooted in attachment and bonding. By learning regulation, the theory of regulation, affect regulation. Alan Shore wrote those tomes in the early 2000s. Affect regulation and the origin of the self. When you understand how much of who we are is very much organized from our conception to 5 co-regulatory experiences, then you understand how parts of our psychology fragment off. You understand how we become more right hemisphere dominant. I walked in a home. I was in Minnesota last week, and I walked into a home to do a consultation, and this was a young man who had severe behaviors. And right there under the television was a stack of early childhood pictures. And this was a young man whose mother died unexpectedly at 6. His father had a traumatic brain injury. Then he ended up in care, and then he bounced around from place to place. And then here are all these pictures from his early childhood. And I said to the worker, I said, who processes these pictures with him? Because we all have pictures, but most of us don't just have them sitting out as constant triggers every single day. And I'm like, if someone's not available to process this stuff with him, this is overwhelming.
So yeah, tell me about your model. How did
Okay,
you
sure.
introduce your model, and what are the major components of it?
Well, the premise of the model is based on a theory I coined years ago, over 2 decades ago now, almost 3 decades. And it's a human behavior model. The stress model says all behavior arises from a state of stress. In between the behavior and the stress is the presence of a primary emotion. There are only 2 primary emotions, love and fear. It's through the expression, the processing, and the understanding of the fear that we calm the stress and diminish the behavior. So you can take the stress model and you can apply it to almost any scenario, because what begins as we look at the behaviors of the child, that's always where we typically want to start. And all behavior that arises from stress and is driven by fear, that same behavior causes us as adults stress. And that stress drives our fear, which drives our behavior, which then leads us to the repetitive stress and fear based patterns that become brain based states. And so, this is the reason children don't get old, they don't grow better, they only grow older. It's because we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So, Joseph Ledoux, who's a New York University neuroscientist, he wrote a book called The Emotional Brain. He says, and this is just beautiful and magical at the same time, in times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. So when you become stressed out because of a behavior that's stressful, then it's confusing your thinking and it's suppressing your short-term memory. Now, I take that all the way into the intimacy of the day-to-day relationships, the day-to-day struggles, the day-to-day work, because then what you do when you combine that with a deep understanding that trauma is any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable. And when you don't have an opportunity to express, process, and understand that event, that becomes that potentially short term stressful experience becomes potentially a life and brain altering traumatic experience. And so I believe that from generations of conditioning, we walk around as traumatized individuals who have not been able to express, process, and understand the traumatic experiences that we've had in our own lifetime, as well as the generations that come before us. And so my work is about helping fundamentally adults understand themselves at a deeper, more conscious level so that they can understand their children at a deeper level and move from a place of fear to a place of love. Because love is the most healing force in the universe. It doesn't matter what the modality is, it doesn't matter what the therapy is, it doesn't matter what the technique is. If ever there is healing that takes place, it is because of the presence of love. Love is the common denominator in all of healing. And so I just try to help people become more mindful of their own fear-based states. And in instances that they have pains and traumas, then we work through processing and understanding those. And Carl Jung said long time back in the 50s that the only thing that we're doing when we're healing trauma is bringing something that's unconscious and shedding more conscious light on it. Then you have more power over it. Then you have more control over it.
I feel like there's so many words that we could use, where, yeah, and you did, the fear could also be the prolonged stress, could also be the trauma, the love, I could say maybe there's compassion in that, there's curiosity, there's creativity. Like we could expand on those two things, but
That's right.
ultimately that's how I see, EMDR as well, that you're really taking these two sides, the fear and the love, you're putting them together, you're doing the bilateral, and you're seeing what comes when you weave the two together. The
Yes.
fear is released and the love becomes bigger and bigger, really,
Yes.
when we're able to have the vulnerability to open up to both sides at the same time.
Yes. Well, Jesus said it perfectly that perfect love and fear can't coexist. So where one is, the other one isn't. So we
Yeah,
have
it's like
we,
light and darkness, right?
that's exactly it. And Sheldon Kopp, who's a psychotherapist in the 70s, one of his most popular books was If You See the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him. I just love the title. But one of the things that he said in another book he wrote called The Psychotherapy Guru is that before you can get out of something, you have to be willing to get into it. And see, we spend a lot of
Huh.
time dancing around the surface, which is the behavior, instead of getting into the emotion, which is the stress and the fear and the traumatic experiences. And we really have been conditioned in our societies. I believe that most of what we've grown up experiencing as children wasn't actually love. It was actually fear disguised as love. So we have
Hmm.
all these concepts of how we relate to one another and we call them loving, but actually they're not loving at all. They're very fear based, they're very fear inducing. And at the very least, it's about creating soothing and survival for myself. Because, and this is what I tell people all the time, when someone else is crying, how often does someone walk up to that crying person and say, let it out. Give it to me. We are conditioned to say, oh, it's okay. You'll be all right. Here's a Kleenex. Don't cry. It's fine. Pick your chin up.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
get, and then all we're doing is we're just continuing to suppress emotion. And that is not how we create healing. And that's why people end up stuck and essentially grieving their entire lives. They grieve their entire lives and they don't know. And it's only when they're stressed, and this is back to the EMDR stuff and also the IFS work. It's when you're stressed and your brainstem gets activated because your brainstem is connected to all of those earliest memories that you've had from conception. From conception, your brainstem storing all those memories. And when you get really stressed, your brainstem is what's activated while your brainstem is unconscious. It's your state level of memory. It's unconscious. So you're not even aware. And how often do we walk around just in this unconscious world? I had a lady asked on my responded to me on Instagram on one of my videos. She said, how do I start becoming more, how do I start the process of becoming more regulated? And I said, you start by becoming more mindful. You don't worry about being regulated. Worry about focus on being more mindful, focus on breathing, and then
Mm.
focus on grieving the things that have hurt you in the past because those unconscious experiences are disrupting your conscious reality. And then that's what's taken over. So, yeah,
See, I agree with you. So I could listen to you talk all day. I love this. And and just to insert that, I feel like that's such a potent question of like, how do I regulate? How do I relax? And it's like our body naturally wants to move to that place. Like you just
yes.
have to allow it to do that. If we could
Hmm.
take away the obstacles, our body's going to get there. And so
That's
you
right.
bring mindfulness is beautiful because it's really kind of like mindfulness of like this is how I see it, and this is maybe IFS informed, is okay, let's not worry about getting relaxed because the more you try to get relaxed, the more you're going to tighten up and feel like you have to do something, right? So it's
Yes.
like relaxing is the exact opposite of that. Why don't we instead focus on what's blocking you from being
Mm-hmm.
relaxed? And see
Hmm.
if we could honor that, if we could let it in, if we could
Hmm.
become aware of it, then it'll
Hmm.
soften, then we'll
Hmm.
find our way towards relaxing
Yeah,
because it's a state of
100%.
being. It's not an end result.
Yes. Yes. A state of being. That is a very important word because that reflects a state level, and your state level is the level of your being where your personality or traits are stored. It's also the level of being where trauma gets stored. So trauma gets interwoven with your personality traits. And so Bruce Perry says states become traits. So when we talk about a state of being, we are always in varying various states of being. And so getting really mindful about what state you're in without judgment becomes the first step towards really uncovering what has you in that place.
Yeah. Yeah. Our bodies are instruments that are picking up things from the environment that we need to metabolize and understand in order to live. So we're just like the states in that example is just the dashboard of our bodies.
That's
And
right.
being able to read, like, okay, where are we at right now? What do we need to respond to so that we could respond in the most present, focused way?
Absolutely.
And then what would you say is the traits that we are? Like how does that become solidified into us?
Well, it becomes solidified because we all have what gets developed is hardwired into us, our personality traits. So our personality traits are the parts of us that are going to be us, that we carry from heaven when we come down and move into this lifetime. We all have our dominant personality traits. But when you experience trauma, those experiences get all wrapped up in those same traits. So those the core experience of who you are. And so you could be a happy person, but that happiness could also trigger you into impulsivity, anger outbursts, disconnection, shutdown, overwhelm. You could be a naturally loving person, but if you've experienced trauma, you go along and you're in your day to day and you're loving, loving, loving until you get triggered and then you're an asshole. And then you can't recover from being an asshole because now you're back into your trauma and your trauma has wrapped around your personality and has become who you are in that moment until you can settle it down. And it's, the Incredible Hulk with Lou Ferrigno. That's the perfect example of the state level taking over when you get hijacked. Is David Banner was a lovely guy. He was a nice scientist until he would get too stressed. And he would breathe and he would try to hold it at bay, but eventually the amygdala would hit that brainstem and whatever trauma was stored down in there would get released and the Hulk would come out. And the Hulk would come out until the Hulk was exhausted. So the Hulk would then fall asleep. That's hypoarousal. So Bruce Perry says the brain responds to stress when really it reacts to stress. The amygdala reacts, it's without thought to stress in one of two different ways. We become hyperaroused or become hypoaroused. So the Hulk, when David Banner was overwhelmed, the Hulk would become hyper aroused until he was exhausted. You could tell me about something that made you upset from your spouse that morning, and we can start right there and then honor that. But then I can walk you back really quickly to your early experience as a reflection of why you felt overwhelmed. And so I like to say that emotional reactivity stems from unfinished business. If you find yourself being emotionally reactive about someone or something, it has far less to do with that person or that thing and far more to do with what's going on with you. I want to bring the person back to a deep understanding of their story, of their pain, of their early experience that's causing the upset feelings, whether it's shame or anger or whatever it may be, so that they can feel more empowered over their own life and their own reactions, as opposed to disempowered and held hostage by what other
Yeah.
people may or may not be doing.
I love that. And I kind of was thinking as you're saying that, well, IFS talks about, notice what parts you're blended with, ideally. And so
Yeah.
you could unblend from them. I'm thinking, and maybe there's just a different way of saying that. As you're talking, it's like, notice who else is in the room right now.
Hmm.
Like we bring people from our past that have
Hmm.
hurt us, and we bring them into the room when we get activated.
Yeah.
Notice who else is in the room so they
Hmm.
don't have the power to activate you. Once it's conscious,
Hmm.
you could
Hmm.
kind of separate from them a little bit more.
Yeah, you do. I mean, one of the things I really like about IFS is how they do give people good visuals or
Yeah.
it's a great framework for helping them re-engage their power and their center.
Which is, I kind of think what MI does in their own way too. It gives us a language on how to like be with somebody and
Hmm.
really listen for the change talk, listen for the what somebody is really trying to express and reflect that back. That's part of the beauty, I think, for me, of motivational interviewing.
I believe that the person that makes any of those modalities impactful and effective is the therapist themselves. So the therapist, in their own self awareness, becomes the primary regulating figure for the client that they're working with. I see the parents as the catalyst to healing. They are the dominant
100%.
regulatory figure. But my responsibility is to create regulation in the primary relationship with the adults so that I can then teach them and guide them and develop them and nurture them into how to understand and create those co-regulating experiences with their children. Because when I'm gone and that child gets stressed out, the battle is between the parent and the child. And the parent has to be able to regulate themselves first. I don't feel like, as clinicians, from our graduate school training forward, we have been given enough guidance and enough focus on our own internal experience. I feel like too much of therapy, and it starts with cognitive behavioral therapy, is reflected in this tool that I can learn at a head level, and I can interject that with my client. But what it's discounting is the unconscious reactions that I'm having to my client that I might not even be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Therefore, I'm not aware of what's actually going on in their body, nor am I able to actually emotionally create containment for them if I'm not reflecting on what's going on with me.
So see,
Because
what we're really doing with what you're saying is we're talking from the fear place that's disguised as love.
there you go. There you go. I did not understand until I was working with a dad and his 13-year-old son adopted from a Russian juvenile detention center.
Oh God. Talk about
I did not,
trauma.
yeah, right. Exactly. I did not understand my own internal process in relationship to my client until I was doing that work. And we were on a mat on the floor, and I was laying down beside them, and they were in the process of really intense exchange. And I took a moment and I looked down and I realized that my knees, my toes were curled and my knees had moved up. And I was basically I was in a fetal position as the clinician. My body was completely stressed. And as soon as I realized that, I took a deep breath, I relaxed my body, and then I stopped the dad and the son through in the interaction that they were having. And that was a pivotal moment in my awareness of self-awareness for a clinician. This is a real problem in mental health, and it's kind of why we get the lack of results that we do, because we continue to not be self-aware of what we're bringing to the table in working with these families. And then we create all of these boundaries around the work and between us and our clients. And all that's just, in many instances, it's just a bunch of fear-based justification that we've been taught is how we can rationalize being clinician and then being patient.
I was having a conversation with somebody from MI the other day, and we were talking how, like, for her system, and for me too, it's like to really embody the spirit of MI, the PACE, PACE, that it really is about living it, having it be, becoming that within
Mhm.
yourself. And I think with IFS too, it's like, they talk a lot in the book that I worked on. We have a whole chapter or a couple chapters on therapists knowing their own parts. What parts are coming up? How do you do what's called the fire drill, where you take the parts and you separate them out and you look at them in the session. So it's like, okay,
Mhm.
I see you. I'll come and I'll be with you and I'll sit with you after the session. But right now, can we just do a fire drill and just externalize out? And then EMDR even too. I think they're starting to get more aware of this stuff, and some people are bringing it more into the field of really appreciating the co-regulation and really
Yes.
appreciating, like, how do we make what we're saying a part of our own daily practice.
The thing that brings us to real value, which is relationship and the real engagement of relationship, it's discounted, it's limited. You have managed care. Managed care limits your sessions. And so then you got to do some kind of rapid cognitive behavioral therapy practice to try to help people have this breakthrough. It ain't it. I mean, in the 70s, research came out and said that the relationship between the psychotherapist and the client was the most powerful, was the most healing part of the catalyst to therapy. It hasn't changed. Relationship and the ability to regulate and teach co-regulation is at the foundation of everything that we do. Because Bruce Perry says, we're all biologically engineered for a relationship. Every dendrite, every synapse, every cell is engineered for relationship.
And
In
what
the
is
moment,
relationship?
it
Relationship
is.
is love. It's love manifested.
That's right.
How amazing would it be if in the elementary level we taught kids about relationships? We taught kids how to relate to each other. We gave them the basic skills to be able to do that. I
How
don't believe, I mean,
how amazing, David, if at the elementary school level we could just model relationships. If teachers could model what it means to be in relationship. What if teachers could just be regulated instead of stressed out like they are, because they are human beings and they
and
have
they're siloed in their
stressors.
classrooms, or they're not
And
getting paid enough.
one
And
100%.
yeah.
Absolutely. They're being threatened to be laid off, and there's increasing pressure on passing tests, and it is a screwy system at all levels.
And then we think about, like, how could we help, right? And people have told me, you help yourself so you could be the best version of yourself that you can be out in the world. We help people one person at a time who we're sitting with right there in that moment. That's a relationship that matters. That's what we're doing. Both you and I, we're doing the work where I think we're doing our best to share love from a loving place. And
100%.
that's where it's at, and yet, at times, it's hard because we're working against the current. It feels like there's systemic things that are actually pushing against that, and it's sometimes hard to feel that.
the challenge to get to love is so difficult because it's not reflected all around you. It's stress and fear dominates us, and then it makes it really hard for us to hold a space and a presence of love. So when you're doing that, especially when you work in a system of fear, then it is can become really overwhelming. And it's I'm reminded of sometimes some of the cultures that I work in, and even my own. I have a company that I started, and even that culture, which was based on love and passion, I can see when fear starts to seep in because we all bring our blueprints to the forefront. And when we're not deeply aware of what our blueprints are rooted in, we think that we are making loving decisions or conscientious decisions, when in fact, those decisions are being driven by fear. And that is ultimately going to
Yeah.
bring people down.
It's hard, right? Because fear is able to disguise itself as love, but
That's right.
love doesn't disguise itself as fear. So
That's
we
right.
could easily be, we could easily see people who are fear-based and being led by their fear. But then you have these other people that, and we're always constantly moving, but then you have this other force that's like love, but it's really underneath that is fear.
Yes. Then what is love? Love is slowing down. Love is being present. Love is breathing, and love is being able to make eye contact and loving eye contact. Love is being able to listen without forming a statement in defense. Love is about seeking to understand where someone is coming from without needing to control, suppress, or change it. Love suspends judgment. Love is not judge, does not judge. It suspends judgment, and it seeks to understand and to be interested and to be compassionate. And one of the greatest bridges that we have to be able to move from fear to move to a place of love is breathing. Breathing, the most simple and available practice that's available to all of us. One of the most challenging and difficult things to do when we're stressed. Herbert Benson was a physiologist at Harvard in the 70s. He wrote a book called The Relaxation Response. He said the first thing that we do when we become stressed is we start holding our breath and we start
Mm,
taking very short, ineffective breaths. So the moment we
mm.
become stressed, we're no longer thinking clearly and we can't remember. We just moved into fear. Our cellular system just moved into a constricted state, which is now creating a vibration. That is creating the reality of the energy. And so that is the energy and the vibration that dominates the situation. The most powerful thing that we can do is stop and breathe and
And what's
slow down.
what's really cool about that is that what you're saying is really profound. And I was thinking about how a little while ago, how bilateral stimulus is anything that goes back and forth and back and forth. That's your breath. That's your breath
Yes,
right there going in and out and in and out. And when you say slow down and breathe, again, that's so profound because it's tapping into our internal rhythm where when
yes,
we stop breathing, our motion is stopped. When we
yes.
stop breathing, we get constricted and time just locks in. And when we're breathing, now we're flowing, now we're
That's right.
moving, now
That's
we're
right.
getting back into that like alignment.
And as you were saying that, you said bilateral, and then you said when you start breathing, you tapped your heart. And that's exactly the significance. It is left hemisphere, right hemisphere, heart. And that's the bilateral because the right hemisphere is connected to the heart. And when we become really stressed and we constrict, then our emotion dictates to our thinking, and then we start thinking really fast. That's the constriction. That's the overwhelmed thought. That's the suppressed short term memory. Then we get disconnected from the heart. So that bilateral, that breathing, is flowing that integration, allowing that integration. And that's where oxytocin comes into place. See, when we don't breathe, cortisol takes over. When we are breathing, oxytocin can turn on. When oxytocin turns on, we can start to relax. When we can start to relax, that's when we can start to think clearly. That's when we can start to remember. That's when we can engage our heart and we can start to have compassion. We can connect to sadness. We can connect to grief. We can connect to loss.
Well, yes, yes, and I think that when we're talking about the bilateral, what's coming up for me is we're also moving back and forth from our mind to our heart, from our mind to our heart.
Yes.
And you need that movement to have love. When you
Mhm.
don't have that movement, the head circles, the heart, or the feelings just become constricted into whatever feeling. That's the fear. The fear is when that connection is no longer moving between each other.
So when I say that all behavior arises from a state of stress, and in between the behavior and the stress is the presence of fear, we can be stressed through any of our sensory pathways. And the moment we become stressed, our cellular system constricts into survival. Now cortisol is increasing. Now our thinking has become confused, distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. So we have all of this energy that is now moving that is survival oriented. It's survival oriented. And then we start holding our breath.
It's survival oriented, but it almost has nowhere to go.
It has nowhere to go. It's constricted. It's constricted. And so what
Yeah.
happens is that energy starts driving. It's like a hamster on a hamster wheel. The more
Yes.
constricted the energy, the faster the hamster wheel's going. And we're going, oh my shit, oh shit, oh shit, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And I tell people that
And
all
I'm
the
not
time.
getting anywhere. And I'm
When
not
we get
getting anywhere.
yes, when we get stressed out, our first immediate thought is I'm gonna die. And we start reacting from that place and we forget to just breathe. Because if you don't breathe, all of that craziness is going to kick in. And then whatever's in that brainstem from conception and beyond, is going to have the capacity to dictate to you how to react in the situation. Therefore, relationships become more challenging.
Oh, God, yes. My therapist, I think, would say that when we're breathing, the breath is also kind of a channel to God
Ah,
that that connects.
yes. Hallelujah. Amen. Listen to this. When we stop breathing, David, when we stop breathing, we hold our breaths and we pass out. If you hold your breath long enough, you'll pass out. You lose connection to consciousness. That's what you lose connection to, consciousness. Your heart keeps beating, your nervous system keeps moving, but you lose access to consciousness when you hold your breath. When you're breathing, you are growing in consciousness. The more you breathe, the more conscious you become. The more conscious you become, the more love filled you become. The more love filled you become, the more God filled you become, because breathing is our direct consciousness to God. The more we breathe, the more we can connect to God. So we must, if we want optimal power, we have to condition ourselves to breathe, because that's how we stay connected to life, to love, and to God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that.
So, shouldn't teachers just be teaching breathing at the beginning of every class,
Yes.
right?
Yes. 100%. 100% yes. And then they should take some classes on group dynamics and group psychology because I think
There you
that would
go.
help them too.
There you go.
But
I had
I like
someone.
what you
I had a county. I was in Minnesota. I had a county ask me. A worker at the county said, "Well, how do you do this for parents who are just completely burnt out and they want to give up?" I said, "Well, number one, you got to help them understand that they're not alone. There are lots of parents that feel the same way. There's lots of adults that feel the same way." I said, "Number two, create a group." Create a group so they can come and connect to other parents. And then I said, you need to understand that they're going to do a lot of bitching and moaning and whining because they're stressed out. They're overwhelmed. They're in survival. They feel ashamed because they've been doing the best they can and they keep getting the same results. And I said, number three, probably the best person to facilitate that is a grief counselor, because they've all got got unexpressed grief. So the struggles and the pain is all unexpressed grief, and they need to be able to grieve. So find yourself not a parenting instructor. Find yourself a grief counselor and let them run the parenting group, because that's the person who's going to help them get to the real root of what's going on with them.
Yeah. And I've heard in IFS circles, people say, I think Jory Agate said this, that all trauma work is really grief work.
It is 100%. That's all trauma is.
Yeah.
It's because that's all trauma is. Trauma is just stored energy that hasn't been expressed. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, in order to express that, we've got to grieve that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think, and this is what motivational interviewing does to me. I would also say, you and I could create an elementary school together. So we teachers, we have them just teaching the breathing, right? And being able to work with one another. And then the next step, I would say, is teaching kids the importance of how do you just listen? How do
Hmm.
you listen? And
Hmm.
and I mean, yeah, they talk about full body listening and you get kids to listen, but to really teach them like the importance of it and how this is what you do to connect to others. Because all this grief, it needs other human hearts and spirits to be able to just hold it and
That's
to be
right.
able to sit with it. Because that's all we need, you
That's
know?
right. That's right. That's right. Presence. We need the loving presence of another human being. That is so
Yeah.
important. It's like
It's
the adult.
everything,
It's like
really.
it is everything. It's like the adult who says, "Why cry at home all the time?" Well, you're crying in isolation. You gotta be, and that's fine. But you got to cry in relationship with someone who can hold you, who can create a container for you, who can really give you that reciprocal, the mirror neurons of love and support and understanding. That's how you get to healing. Otherwise, you're just crying and depressed all the time.
How could people find you? How could people learn
Well,
about
the
you?
the easiest place is just bryanpost.com, bryanpost.com. And then my place for my work is feartolove.com. So feartolove.com is where we have a lot of resources and trainings. And then I do a lot on Instagram, Bryan Post Official.
Yeah, you got some really cool things on Instagram. I was checking that out. I was like, this is really cool. Hey, what are the things that are most exciting to you now that you've been involved with?
Oh my goodness. The things that are probably most exciting to me, I'm developing a program for successful men, for men who've already accomplished a lot of business success, who still find themselves emotionally disconnected, lonely, depressed, unable to bridge the
Mm,
gap between success in business and success in their families and in their relationships. Because I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I love the game of business. And so I want to create a space for those men to be able to have deep emotional healing that otherwise wouldn't be accessible to them. And then I have a program
beautiful.
in Northern California. We work with at-risk adoptive families. That keeps me really excited. And then any opportunity that I encounter to help other people understand AI. I'm really fascinated by AI
Wow.
and all the various ways it can improve our lives, our businesses, especially. I actually developed a parenting app called Bondify, Bondify.ai. It's completely free. It's a parent support app. It's the
I have to
app
check
that you
that out.
needed. It's the coach that you needed in that moment. And everyone knows what that moment was, but it's there for parents to be able to, you can put in as much information as you want, and then you open it up and you literally are texting with me. And so it's programmed with 30 years of my knowledge base. And so I have parents say, I was in the bathroom texting with you the other night, because it feels like we're having a text conversation, and it's beautiful. But I created that as a resource for parents as well as for professionals, because it's also programmed with the same understanding.
Well, anything else that you feel, you would like to share or put
Oh, I
out
think
there,
I'll
or
I'll,
really want
I'll
people?
close I'll close with one thought, and that is, this is for anyone, that in any given moment, we all have two choices. We can continue to react from our same blueprints, our same traumatic experiences, our same amount of fear and overwhelm, or we can stop and we can take 3 to 10 deep breaths and we can choose love. And I hope you'll choose love.
Well, this has been lovely. So thank
Thank you,
you for
David.
your wisdom and for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Empowered Through Compassion. If you're looking for support on your own healing journey, we'd love to hear from you. My wife and I are both licensed social workers in Massachusetts, and together we co-founded Empowered Through Compassion to offer grounded, compassionate space for therapy, supervision, and trauma-informed couples work. You can learn more about what we offer on our website, www.empoweredthroughcompassion.com.